Let me cast you back to 2018. It was the beginning of the Switch's second year, and it was unclear what the future was going to hold. There were a few games that had been announced. We knew that there was a Kirby game coming called Star Allies. We knew there was a Yoshi game. We knew that there was a Pikmin 4 that had been in development for a while. But we didn't know much else after that. There were some things we knew, but not many. I decided at this time that I wanted to try and predict what we would get in that time. I wanted to predict not just the next year, not just the next 2 years, but the entire life of the Switch. Now, this prediction went only up until the end of 2022, because that was when I believed that we would get our next Nintendo console. That has not come to pass, obviously. And now I believe that we're going to probably be waiting until 2025, personally. It could be next year, but I think 2025. But 2022 has come, and it has gone. And honestly, it's kind of interesting looking back at this post that I made about the predictions. Because so much of it was wrong. And I think it's interesting looking at this specifically because we can always think that we know what's coming, but we never do. And that's the truth of it. Because so much of what I put here, I was certain on. I was like, that is happening. And it didn't. So now when I look at people saying, oh yes, the next Smash game will come at this time, the next Mario game will come at this time, the next, I don't know, Animal Crossing or Splatoon will come now, it kind of rings false to me because I know from personal experience how wrong you can get it when you try to predict based on the limited information you realistically have. So I wanted to go back to this post and I wanted to go through it, look at what I predicted, and I went month by month. I kind of figured that in that first year there was a major release practically every month. So I thought that we would get something similar at this in the coming years. And this is focused mostly on first party as well. But I wanted to go through and look at what I predicted, look at how much of it came to pass, look at when most of it came to pass, if it did, and just really marvel at how wrong one person can be. So my first prediction that I made was for January 2018, and at that point we hadn't had any confirmation of what was happening with the Virtual Console. And this was a very, very hotly debated topic at the time. And a lot of people were very unhappy with the fact that we weren't getting a Virtual Console yet. But we didn't know what form it was going to take. Well, I thought that maybe what they were going to do was, in January of 2018, they were going to drop a trailer for the Virtual Console. But that trailer would lean heavily on Earthbound as a selling point. Earthbound was, I mean, it's not the biggest series in the world. However, Earthbound has become a massive, massive cult favourite. It's got a cult following. It's a bit of a fan favourite. And because of that, you can really kind of assume that Earthbound is going to be something that you can really have a lot of effect with when you're marketing a service that gives you old games. So I figured it was the perfect game to kind of sell people on the idea of it with, instead of just using the same old, Super Mario Brothers, Metroid, Star Fox, and so on and so forth. Well, I wasn't right. I wasn't right at all, actually, because not only did we not get a Virtual Console, because instead we got the Nintendo Switch Online subscription service, not only did we not get a Virtual Console service, but that Virtual Console service didn't come actually until September of 2018. So it wasn't January, it was even longer. But not only that, Earthbound wasn't in it for a long time. Like, I'm talking it was one of the final games that they actually added to the Switch Online service. At least in terms of the NES and SNES games. And that again was something that people weren't necessarily happy with, but we didn't get it until February 2022, Earthbound and Earthbound Origins. There still has been nothing on Mother 3, but at time of recording, we've just had a Direct that has announced Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games for the Switch Online. So I'm fairly sure that at some point a Mother translation will be put on there. But yeah, in terms of my prediction, I was so far out on basically every count. The only thing that I was relatively close with was us getting old games in 2018, but that's basically it. The next prediction, and frankly the one that I and probably anyone at the time would have thought was a certainty, was Mario and Sonic at the Winter Olympics. Now, there have, since 2008, always been Olympic games. Mario and Sonic at the Olympic games. I don't think I'm saying that right, but you get my point. We always get those games. And it was really weird when, actually, no, Mario and Sonic at the Winter Olympic Games 2018 didn't happen. Like, the one time I predicted it, like, this was my prediction, and it was a certainty, a basic certainty. And no, no, it wasn't happening. And I get why, because the rights to the Olympic Games were basically, I think it was Ubisoft got them for that specific Winter Olympics, and they made a game with that. So Sega couldn't make Mario and Sonic at the Winter Olympics. But it's typical. I make this prediction, and it's the one Olympics where we don't actually get the game. Like, you can't make it up. Next is Kirby Star Allies. Now, Kirby Star Allies was announced before I made this prediction. We knew that it existed, we knew what it was around about. We didn't have a release date though. So actually the fact that I got March 2018 might not be massively impressive, but there was a bit of debate among the community about whether this or Yoshi would be the early 2018 platformer and which would be the late 2018 platformer. Because both are very similar types of platformer. I think that Donkey Kong Country Tropical Freeze might have also been releasing in that year, but Kirby and Yoshi are both aesthetically cute, easier platformer games. So they kind of fit together in that way. But that also means that you don't really want to have them too close to each other. So it was going to be either late or early 2018, and I chose for Kirby Star Allies to be early and specifically March, and I was right about that. And as for Yoshi, we will get to that in a second, but that didn't end up happening quite as we expected. Next was Animal Crossing. I skipped April, and I figured May 2018 would be our next major release. And yeah, that was for Animal Crossing. In the end, we did get an announcement for Animal Crossing in 2018. And that was for the Direct, during the Direct that announced Isabelle for Smash, and then we got New Horizons announced at the end of that. So, I mean, that doesn't mean I was right by any stretch, but it does feel like Animal Crossing was delayed, so I'm not as wrong necessarily as it seems by the fact that I'm, practically 2 years out. But I just thought that Animal Crossing made sense as an early console game, People look at Animal Crossing's success on the Switch and just say it was all COVID. And I disagree with that, because Animal Crossing was big well before COVID. It was over 10 million copies sold on the 3DS. Quite a bit over, I believe. So I mean, it wasn't necessarily a massively far away from franchises like Mario Kart and Pokemon, which, okay, they were probably about 5 million off, but it's still kind of in that range, isn't it? Animal Crossing has always been big, so I don't agree that Animal Crossing has always been big, but sorry, it has was only made big by COVID. I think it's always been big, and because of that, I thought Animal Crossing not only sells really well, it also pushes consoles, especially for casuals. I thought they'd take advantage of that early in the Switch's life, but clearly they didn't. Or maybe they planned to, but obviously delays and everything, but it didn't materialise. So I was a couple of years out on that prediction. Next was Kid Icarus. This was going to be a new Kid Icarus game, and frankly, I mean, we know what happened here, but I figured that Kid Icarus would be Sakurai's project between Smash games. I thought there was no way at all that he was going to go from one Smash game to the next. No way, that was never going to happen. So there would be something he'd be doing in the meantime, because he was definitely going to be working on something. And I figured he worked on Kid Icarus Uprising, and Uprising was fairly popular from what I've seen. So it made sense to do something with it on the Switch, and yeah, it didn't happen. We know exactly what happened here, but we have yet to get a Kid Icarus game on the Switch, which I've not played Uprising, but it seems like a shame that nothing's been done with that franchise so far. Next is Luigi's Mansion 3. This wasn't announced at the time that I made this prediction, but my prediction was July 2018, and I wasn't too far out, I don't think. October 2019. Oh wait, no, that's quite a bit out. Okay, well, it's about a year out, but to be fair, I would say that that's not too bad. I'm only about a year out. And yeah, I think at the time, if I recall, a lot of people were worried that maybe Luigi's Mansion wouldn't be pushed. I think this may have also been before the Luigi's Mansion remaster on 3DS was made. So, but yeah, I think people were worried that maybe they would skip Luigi's Mansion. It wasn't big enough for them to consider bringing to the Switch, or to, be putting resources in. But no, I was fairly confident that it would happen. Luigi's Mansion 2 seemed fairly popular, so yeah, it just made sense in my mind. And yeah, we got it a little later than I thought, but that's how it works. Then was Mario Party 11. This was the point where they started to, or they stopped using numbers to name the Mario Party games, and but for the purposes of this, we can still say that Super Mario Party is Mario Party 11, even though apparently Mario Party Superstars does not acknowledge that. But ignoring that, so Mario Party 11, I predicted it would be August 2018 because I believed, you know what, the Wii U only had one Mario Party, but I don't think that is something that's going to be maintained in the next console. I think we'll get more than one. And obviously we did, but my prediction was that we would get one early and one a little bit later. And lo and behold, August 8, 2018 came and went, and we didn't have a Mario Party, but October 2018 we did. So I was only 2 months off there. So I think that was a fairly good prediction. There was logic behind it, so I'm fairly happy with that one. Next was Yoshi. At the time this was announced, so we knew that there was a Yoshi game. I think we might have even had a trailer. I can't remember exactly if we had a trailer or not, but we knew that there was a Yoshi game coming. And this was announced, I believe, in 2017 E3. And that's why people thought, okay, it must be a 2018 game, because it's announced in 2017. It's not going to be released in 2019. It's a Yoshi game. A Yoshi game isn't going to take that long to develop. But in the end, it apparently did, because we got it in March 2019. So I wasn't a massive amount out. I was about half a year out with my September 2018 guess. But yeah, I think it was I'm not too unhappy with that as a prediction, because even though it was an unannounced game, it was difficult to predict the idea that the Yoshi game would be released in 2019 rather than 18. It just didn't feel like that was right. Pikmin 4. Now this is a fun one. We knew that Pikmin 4 existed. We hadn't had any trailers or anything. All we knew was that it was in development, or it had been in development. I think we'd known that for a while at this point. But it hadn't materialized yet. But I was like, yeah, I think it's going to be 2018. It's had a fairly long development at this point. It feels like a 2018 game. October 2018, that feels right. 5 years later, and we still do not have Pikmin 4. But at least we know when it's going to be coming out. And we know it's going to be July 2023. So, other than games that have literally not been announced yet, I think of all of my predictions, this might be the furthest out that I have been, because I was literally almost 5 years out with this. But again, that's a difficult thing to predict, really, because we already knew that it had been in development for about 3 years, Pikmin 4. And we don't know what happened in those years, those additional 5 years that made it go on longer. It probably had either some sort of trouble in the development, or maybe they restarted development on it. But something's happened, because a Pikmin game taking 8 years, that's just insane. But yeah, so this prediction was really difficult for anyone to predict, considering we knew the game existed and was in development. No one was going to say that it would take until 2023 to release. And then finally, for my 2018 predictions, was Pokemon in Generation 8. Now, at this point, I don't think I'd necessarily caught onto the idea that Pokemon generations are 3 years like clockwork these days, or at least I was in denial about it. So I thought, okay, I thought, for example, that we were going to get a Switch version of Sun and Moon, the fabled Pokemon Stars, and we got Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon instead. But then after that, I thought, okay, the next game then has to be a new generation, right? But of course, we didn't get that, and instead we got Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, which, I mean, admittedly, we did get Pokemon games, but they weren't Generation 8 Pokemon games. And we had to wait until November 2019 for those. And yeah, so I was off with that by a year, but there's only so a year is basically the maximum I was going to be off by. So it's a binary choice, isn't it? You know it's going to be the holiday period, and you know it's going to be one of the 2 years, because they're not going to wait 4 years for a generation. So yeah, this was an easy one to get wrong, honestly. For 2019, I thought that January would start us out with a Mario and Luigi game. Now, this is going to be a sore subject for Mario and Luigi fans, because that franchise seems to be fairly dead at this point, unfortunately. We've obviously gotten Superstar Saga very recently on the GBA Online. So, you know, that's something, but unfortunately, a new Mario and Luigi game does not look very close to being on the horizon. So, not only was I wrong about that one, but we might not see it for a long time. Next was WarioWare, and I thought that this was going to be a February 2019 release. I figured WarioWare was one of those games that could probably be released around that time. I don't know, early in the console's life. That makes sense, I think. We didn't get it until September 2021, so yeah, that theory. I mean, to be fair, I don't think I had much reasoning for putting it there other than just felt right. I don't know, I didn't really feel like it would have any reason to be later, and there isn't really any reason it did have to be later. I guess just, you know, that was when they made it. Next was Mario Slugger's game. March 2019 was my prediction. We have yet to get one, however, there has been a rumor making the rounds that we may see a Mario Sluggers game on the Switch soon. I think a lot of people are saying it might be June this year. So it's possible we'll get one, but I was completely out with when we would get one. Then Mystery Dungeons, Pokemon Mystery Dungeons. I thought we'd get one on April 2019. Now, here's the thing. We haven't gotten a new Mystery Dungeons game yet. That's just not happened, and it's actually a bit confusing as to why, because the series had, it had Game Boy Advance, DS, 3DS entries. It didn't seem to be particularly unpopular, so it felt like something that we could expect to see. And granted, we have, in that we have seen, the remake of the first game brought to Switch. So we have seen Mystery Dungeon, but that in itself was March 2020, so I was about a year out on that. And it wasn't a new game, so whether you count that, it is another matter altogether. I thought that May 2019 may be our Mario Kart release. I was convinced, and to be completely honest, and as anyone who has watched enough of my channel can tell you, I was convinced for the longest time we were going to be getting a new Mario Kart. No matter what anyone said about Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and how well it was selling, I always just thought a new Mario Kart would sell more. As in, it would sell more in the future than Mario Kart 8 would sell in that same time frame. Now, obviously, that has not happened. We, at the beginning of 2022, got the Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Booster Course Pass, or we're still getting that, and that seems to be our replacement for a new Mario Kart, to be completely honest, with not just the courses, it seems, but now we know that there are going to be characters added, and they've even added things like item customization, so we can't really tell what is going to be in this game. It could end up with an entire game's worth of content, realistically. It's already looking like that. But it's also, it's also true that we have not gotten a Mario Kart because of that. So my prediction here was well off. But even if you wanted to make the case that the Booster Course Pass counts as getting a new Mario Kart game, I'm still 3 years off on that count anyway. So yeah, I can't claim this one as anything but a complete failure. And I kind of wish that we had gotten a Mario Kart on the Switch. It would be nice for Mario Kart to have its for the Switch to have its own Mario Kart, rather than just kind of having built on the Wii U's Mario Kart. But it's hard to complain considering all the content we're getting. Detective Pikachu was my next prediction, and I believe, and I'm not entirely sure, but I believe the idea of a port of Detective Pikachu onto the Switch was discussed or had been announced. I can't remember if the sequel had been announced at that point. It may well have been, but regardless, neither of those has actually happened. The reason I put it for June 2019 was because I figured it would make sense, at least for the port, to get it out to coincide with the movie's release, which I believe was June 2019. Or maybe it wasn't, but I thought that was when I thought that we would get the port in line with when the movie was releasing. And that just never happened. And as far as we know, both the port and, or I guess it's probably going to be a remaster, both the remaster and the sequel are still happening, but at this point it feels like they've been cancelled because we have heard nothing on them. Next up was Fire Emblem. Now, we did have it announced at the time that I made this prediction that a Fire Emblem game was in active development, and it did have a release date of 2018. And despite that, I kind of thought that it would get kind of pushed back, and I thought it would be delayed until July 2019. What was the release date? July 2019. So, I mean, I'm going to claim this one. Unlike Star Allies, this one was one where I just used my intuition and didn't, it was there was no reason to go. We thought that it was going to be 2018, and yet my prediction, I thought, nah, I don't think it's going to be that. So yeah, I'm claiming this one. I guessed when we'd get a Fire Emblem game pretty correctly. It's a shame that I don't care about Fire Emblem, but that it's what it is. For August 2019, I thought that we were going to get a new 2D Mario game. And by that, I don't mean a new Super Mario Bros. Game. I thought we were straight up going to get a new 2D Mario game, which... a new 2D Mario game which had a different art style, maybe had some additional gameplay additions, that kind of stuff. Now, obviously that has not happened, and to be completely honest, I'm personally still waiting for that. Because I think that it would be... I personally am a massive fan of 2D platformers, and especially 2D Mario. I like New Super Mario Bros. I like the game. Don't get me wrong, I like the New Super Mario Bros. Game. But it doesn't scratch the itch that I'm looking for in a 2D Mario game. The same way that, for example, Odyssey did for 3D Mario games. I want my 2D Mario games to be more ambitious and more creative. Now, admittedly, we did get a 2D Mario game in 2019, but it was New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe, so you may have noticed that I haven't really got many ports in here. That's because I thought that the ports were primarily going to be something that they had in the beginning of the console's life, and that they would have faded out fairly quickly. I thought it was just a transitionary thing. Turns out, no, they just want to wipe the Wii U off the face of the planet, and this is their way of doing it. So I did not predict that we would get a port of New Super Mario Bros. U Deluxe. I got right that we were getting a 2D Mario game, just not what it would be exactly, and the nature of it. I next thought that Mario & Rabbids 2 was going to be September 2019. Now, I guess I just thought that, the first game did pretty well, and it wouldn't take too long to make a new one, but October 2022 is when we got it, so clearly it was... maybe they were working on other stuff before they started this game, but yeah, it does seem that maybe they took a bit more time on it than I was anticipating at that point. Metroid Prime 4, I thought was going to be October 2019. Now, we know that this is still coming. We did get news about it in 2019, but it wasn't the news that anyone wanted, really. It was the news that it had been completely scrapped and started again. So, at that point, people thought, yeah, it's going to take a lot longer to come out. And we're kind of now at the point where it's like, okay, where the heck is this game? Has there been more issues? Is it going to get scrapped? But given the amount of time that has been since that, so it was the beginning of 2019 we got that. We're now in 2023. 4 years, that is. 4 years since we know that the game was scrapped and started development. And if I'm being honest, we might never see it if it does end up getting to 5 years and we hear nothing, because at that point that's taking a long time. But regardless, even if they hadn't had that scrapping and starting again, it doesn't seem particularly likely that I was going to be close to the release date, because obviously October 2019 was just way too ambitious for them to get that. They had clearly not been working on it very long at all when they announced Metroid Prime 4. So I guess I had assumed that there had been more development time. Clearly there wasn't, so whether it had been scrapped or not, I don't think I was particularly close with this prediction. I don't think I would have been close. Next was Mario Maker 2, which I thought would come November 2019. This is the first example that I have of a game that I've actually overestimated how long it had taken till we'd get it. I predicted November 2019, but the game actually released before that in June 2019. So I wasn't too far off, to be completely honest. So, I'd count that as a success. But Yeah, June 2019 was when we got it. Yeah, I think that I got that fairly close. And then finally, Me Sports. So I think everyone can figure out what it is I mean by this. It's basically a Wii Sports game, but just without the Wii title because it's not on the Wii. And we did get that. We did get a game that is basically Wii Sports without the Wii title. But we didn't get it in December 2019. We got it in April 2022 as Nintendo Switch Sports. So, I mean, everyone was predicting that we would get a Nintendo Switch Sports. So I can't exactly say that it's impressive that I got that right. But, yeah, I was a good year, 2.5 years out on that, unfortunately. So, yeah. Honestly, looking at 2019 actually in general, there's a fair chunk of games. I think about half the games that I predicted have not yet come, which is weird considering some of them are things that we consider mainstays, or either mainstays or games that had been announced, such as Metroid Prime 4 and Detective Pikachu. So, yeah, very interesting year, I think. Starting off 2020 in my world was Donkey Kong Country. Now, in my mind, this was going to be a new Donkey Kong Country game, and importantly, I thought that King K. Rool was going to be the main boss of this, the main villain. Now, again, these predictions that I made were before Smash Ultimate was even announced, so I wasn't using any knowledge of him being in Smash for this. I just thought there isn't actually a reason for them not to use K. Rool. They're probably going to use K. Rool. And to be fair, in the future, if they do make a Donkey Kong Country game, they're probably going to make K. Rool the main villain again. But for now, we don't have a Donkey Kong Country game, or at least not other than Tropical Freeze, which released in 2018. So, yeah, this is a bit surprising, but we could still see something along the lines of this at some point. Next was Gen 4 remakes. Now, Gen 4 remakes were something that we could be fairly certain were going to happen. And obviously, as I was predicting a Generation 8 game at the end of 2018, it kind of actually does make sense that a little bit over a year later, well, actually, it's probably more like a year and a half later, we would get our next thing in Pokemon. Now, I guess I had been accounting for DLC, but and that's why there's a larger gap between Gen 4 remakes and Generation 8 than there was in reality. There was a shorter gap, sorry. There's a longer gap than we normally have, the year gap, but obviously shorter than what actually happened, which was we had a whole year of DLC, and then the next year was the Gen 4 remakes. I guess I was just assuming that the gaps would be larger now, but they would end up the gaps would be larger, but that would end up increasing the quality of the games, I guess. And also this was before really the yearly releases were as settled as it was, because if we remember, Generation 7 came before a year break in Pokemon releases, so it was difficult to be able to predict at that point. Easier these days, but even then we don't really know what's happening with Pokemon now. We don't know what the next step is, to be completely honest, other than DLC. So, yeah, Gen 4 remakes. Obviously, March 2020 wasn't right. It was November 2021 that we got them. So I was a bit out, but you've got to remember that we have to kind of adjust for, the fact that I thought that Gen 8 was going to be the previous year. Next, I thought a small Zelda game would be released in April 2020. And by small Zelda game, I mean something like Link Between Worlds, where the ones that you would expect on the handheld, really. But now that the Switch is both console and handheld, those Zelda games shouldn't go away. Now, we did kind of get one of these smaller Zelda games in Link's Awakening, but that was a port, or well, not even a port, it was a complete remake. So I don't know how much it counts, but just out of the out of curiosity, I guessed April 2020. I was actually late to that game. It was actually released in September 2019. So if you count, if you count Link's Awakening, then I'm only about half a year out there. Next, I thought ARMS 2 was going to be released, and I'm guessing this was before I realised that ARMS 2, that ARMS was made by the same people as Mario Kart, because I had a Mario Kart game earlier in this list, in this prediction list. So, but yeah, May 2020, we haven't got an ARMS 2. I don't think we're going to, not for a long time. We might have a couple of consoles before they return to ARMS at this point, considering how, for example, Punch-Out! We haven't seen since the Wii, and it doesn't look like we're going to get one on the Switch, so ARMS could go through a very similar fate. Won't necessarily stay dead forever, but it's not necessarily going to come back soon either. F-Zero is another one of those franchises, and I guess because of Mario Kart 8 and how they added, they added F-Zero courses in DLC, it kind of felt like they were potentially angling for an F-Zero game. It's never materialized. We haven't got an F-Zero game yet. June 2020 was my prediction, and we're still waiting. Then we have Mario and Sonic at the 2020 Beijing Olympic Games. Was it Beijing? No, I can't remember where it was. I can't remember where those Olympic Games were. Oh no, that was the Tokyo ones, yes. So, the Tokyo Olympic Games. Now, here's the thing. I was right that we got it, which is more than I can say about the Winter Olympics the previous year. I was right about us getting Mario and Sonic at the 2020 Olympic Games, but I guessed July 2020 because I figured, you know what? It makes sense for a game about the Olympics to release around the same time as the Olympics. And we ended up getting it November 2019, which I'm not sure I get that. Like, is that normally when they release? They normally do it so far away from the actual games, because that just feels weird to do it so far out. But either way, I still got right that we were getting one, which at the time didn't really feel like that much of a victory, but now it feels like it. But yeah, that's a big difference actually in time frame. Then we have Star Fox, and yep, just like F-Zero, just like ARMS, has not materialized. August 2020 was my prediction, and we have not seen hide nor hair of Star Fox. I feel like I thought that a lot of the classic franchises were going to get games. Doesn't look like it's happened. Most of the ones that have gotten games are the ones that have had well-received games within the last two generations, so the Wii U and the Wii. Metroid, for example. Metroid got a game, but that had a Wii game that was very well received. And Pikmin as well. Pikmin 3 was on the Wii U, and now we're getting a Pikmin game. Whereas something like Star Fox or F-Zero, it feels like when they're dormant for a long enough period of time, they just don't do anything with it. And Star Fox had a Wii U game, but that was very poorly received. So it's looking unlikely that we'll get Star Fox, but hey, there's always a chance. There's always a chance with any of these games. Next is Pokemon Conquest 2, which I thought was going to be September 2020. To be completely honest, Pokemon spin-offs have kind of died. I believe last year was the first year in a long time where we haven't actually received a Pokemon spin-off at all, which is insane to me. But we'd had spin-offs previously in the Switch's life. I guess because spin-offs now take a lot longer to make. Games in general take a lot longer to make, and sure, when you're making your main series games, you adapt to that, but when it comes to the spin-offs, do you really want to be doing that? So instead, there's been a lot more focus on the mobile games, and games, similar to mobile games. So, Pokemon Go is still going strong. Pokemon Masters is, still going as well, apparently. And Pokemon Unite as well seems to be chugging along pretty steadily. And I guess these games took a lot longer to make, although actually, well, I mean, to an extent, than previous remakes. But also not as much as a main series game necessarily, and those are games that can be constantly added to. So their priority with spin-offs seems to have changed. Not that they don't do them. Obviously, new Pokemon Snap and Mystery Dungeon DX prove that they're still into the idea of remakes, even new remakes sometimes. But the priorities definitely have shifted quite significantly. Next, I thought we were going to get an October 2020 release of Smash 5. And as I said earlier, we all know what happened there. Sakurai didn't decide to make a Kid Icarus game in the meantime. He decided to make a Smash game right afterwards. And by he decided, I think we all know that it's Nintendo who decided that. But yeah, I'm not complaining that we got Smash early. The only time I would have been unhappy was the rumour that everyone was banding around that we would have got a Smash 4 port, which I did not want. And to be completely honest, I remember when everyone still thought it was a port when Smash Ultimate got announced, and then when gameplay was shown off, and then up until release, people were still saying, nah, it's just a port, which is really weird. But anyway, that's not the topic of today's discussion. Anyway, so I was a couple years out with Smash, but yeah, again, that was difficult to predict, I think. No one thought that we were going to be getting a Smash game so soon after Smash 4. It was, 4 years? That's insane. Like, not that it's insane to get it after 4 years, but the fact that Sakurai just went straight onto working on it, no one was predicting that. Next is Paper Mario. So I thought November 2020. We ended up getting Origami King on July 2020. So honestly, I'd say that's not too bad. A pretty decent prediction on the Paper Mario. And then finally, in December 2020, I thought we were going to get a 3D series Mario game. And by this I mean a game in the same series as 3D Land and 3D World. I figured with a full 3D Mario game already on the Switch, it made sense to do something a little bit different. And, it's not as if we could complain about not getting a 3D Mario, because we had Odyssey. But, 3D World was not as ambitious, shall we say, as other Mario games. It's a great game, excellent game, but obviously we didn't... It just wasn't quite what a lot of people were looking for in a 3D Mario game, but it has its merits, and one of those is multiplayer, to be completely honest. So I think what I was thinking was that maybe we would get that as a multiplayer alternative for people who weren't as into the idea of just having a single player Mario game and wanted something that was a bit more social, shall we say. To add things in, you've got lots of variety within the franchise. I think that would have actually been quite good. Now, what we actually ended up getting was a port of Super Mario 3D World. And as I say, December 2020 was my prediction. 2021 in February was when we actually got 3D World. The port, anyway. And that might not in itself sound that impressive, because, of course, it's a port, not a full game, which is what I'm predicting. However, the interesting thing is that we did actually kind of get sort of a sequel to 3D World. And when I say that, I mean Bowser's Fury, obviously, which isn't necessarily a full game. It's a short game, but it still had, it was still kind of new content, and it's kind of like a self-contained game. So I was actually surprisingly close, but not quite on the money, because obviously this wasn't multiplayer focused. It was actually, weirdly for a 3D series game, it was almost completely single player. You could play as Bowser Jr., but it was very much, it had a design philosophy very, very similar to 3D Mario games, whereas 3D World, one of the things that it did quite differently from 3D Mario games was that it took a 2D game's philosophy. So, yeah, I was kind of right, but also not really. So, for January 2021, I thought that we were going to get a non-copyability Kirby game. So this is the kind of game where it's still a platformer, obviously, but just not using Kirby's copy abilities, which we've had a lot of these in the past. Kirby's Epic Yarn is a good example of one. I believe there was the Magic Paintbrush or something like that, and Squeak Squad I don't think was copy ability Kirby. Regardless, there's a bunch of Kirby games where they're still the platformers of Kirby, but they just don't use his copy abilities. I assumed we would get one on the Switch, seeing as the last two consoles had had one. Didn't happen. It has not happened. I mean, I'm not counting the Gourmet Battle Royale, whatever that game was, mainly because of the fact that it's not a platformer, not a 2D platformer anyway, and it's not an adventure game. You know, those kinds of things are the kinds of things I was expecting. So yeah, we haven't gotten something like this. We have had a non-traditional Kirby game in that we have had Forgotten Land, which is a 3D Kirby game, and that was last year. But that again isn't the same thing. So no. I also predicted Mario Party 12 for February of 2021, and I seem to be really good at guessing the years of Mario Party releases, because we got a Mario Party game on October of 2021. Now, obviously, that is firstly still, you know, a good few months away, you know, most of the year. And secondly, it was kind of a remaster of some of the boards and minigames, but I still think it counts as a new Mario Party, so I'm counting it. And yeah, so I'm taking that as I got it in the same year. No one else is going to say anything about this. So yeah. Pokken Tournament 2 I thought was going to be in March 2021. Nope. Which is a shame, because I really enjoyed the first Pokken Tournament, and because of the fact that I had Pokken Tournament on Wii U, I couldn't justify getting Pokken Tournament DX on Switch, which was really sucked because it had a bunch of new characters, just not enough for me to be able to justify buying the game when I already had the game, but also, you know, enough that I would feel like I'm missing out, especially when Darkrai was one of the characters they added, and it's one of my favourite Pokemon, so that kind of sucks. It sucks that we haven't gotten a Pokken Tournament game yet. Xenoblade X2. I feel like, in hindsight, if I knew what I know now about how Xenoblade works, there's no way I would have predicted we'd get Xenoblade X2. Yeah, I feel like it was never going to happen, and it's never going to happen. We might get a re-release of X, that's still possible, but we're not going to get a sequel because they'll just move on to Xenoblade 4. There's no reason to do like these spin-off things, which are basically just like the main games. I don't get why companies often do that. They make a game that is pretty much a main game, but they don't call it a main game. They call it a spin-off, like, you know, Xenoblade X. Why was that not just Xenoblade 2? I'm not quite sure I understand, but it's not for me to understand, I guess. In May 2021, I thought that we were going to have a new Super Mario Bros. Game. Now, 2021, and yeah, 2021 was a pretty... I thought that this kind of made 2020 and 2021, I thought was going to be kind of like a few Mario games there. And one of the reasons was because I thought that we would be getting... one of my ideas for how Mario could be handled on any given console, really, is that there would always be a completely unique and primarily single-player focused 2D and 3D platformer game, like Odyssey, for example. But then there would also be a 3D world game and a 2D, a new Super Mario Bros. Game, because those series are very solid series. They're good, they're fun. I really enjoy those games. It's just that they're not very ambitious, and that's what I want in a Mario game a lot of the time. But taking down the ambition actually really does help for the multiplayer side of things, and I think there is a definite market for New Super Mario Bros. And 3D World as series that could, that could continue and give people, multiplayer options for these Mario games. And we did get New Super Mario Bros. U DX in January of 2019. I'm not counting that though. I mean, I guess it does count, but it's not quite what I'm looking at here. So yeah, as it stands, really, I mean, we have plenty of Mario games on the Switch, but in terms of new content, it's only Odyssey and Bowser's Fury, really, which is a bit disappointing, because even if it was a new Super Mario Bros. Game, it would be something. And I always did think that this would all kind of work quite well with Mario Maker as well. It would all, merge together, and, there's options for anyone for what they want to play, but apparently not. Next, I thought June 2021 would be Splatoon 3 time, and I was over a year out there, not much over a year, but September 2022 was when Splatoon 3 came out. I think I was younger then. I mean, not that I was a kid or anything, but I didn't really understand how long a lot of these games took to develop. I thought it was, 2-3 years max was a big game, but no, games take a long time to make. They really do, and I understand that a lot better now. So it's no surprise that something like, Splatoon 3 released, 5 years after the original. That makes sense, to be completely honest, in hindsight. Next, an action-adventure Pokemon game, which I predicted for July 2021. Now, I referred to this as a spin-off because I was very against the idea of an open-world, action-adventure Pokemon game at the time, at least in the main series. And it's ironic because we have gotten not necessarily an open world, but open area Pokemon game, action-adventure and everything. And that's in Legends Arceus, and it's now my favourite Pokemon game. So looking back at how my sentiments towards the idea back then, yeah, I feel kind of silly now, but it's what it is. But at least I had kind of considered the idea of I had considered the idea of Pokemon being I had considered the idea of Pokemon getting this action-adventure game, and I got it fairly close. July 2021, January 2022. I'm within half a year. I'd say that's fairly impressive, honestly, considering what it is. So Mario Basketball. This was my next prediction, and it was for August 2021. You may have noticed that I haven't thrown in Mario Golf or Mario Tennis yet. The main reasons being because I just thought we wouldn't get them. I can't actually remember. Maybe one of those was already. I think Mario Tennis may have already announced released at that point. No, can't remember. But either way, I didn't think that we were going to get Strikers or Golf. I thought that they were going to, swap through the Mario Sports games that they were going to do. They were going to do different ones, I thought. And as it happens, I mean, we might be getting Sluggers, and we have already got Strikers, but they do seem to really like doing their tennis and golf games. Maybe they're easier to make, I don't know, but yeah, so Mario Basketball isn't a thing. I mean, not on the Switch. I predicted for September 2021 a Fire Emblem game. Now, Engage has only just released January 2023, so I was a bit out there. Again, I think that I underestimated how long a lot of these games would take to make, because I just assumed that they were smaller games that wouldn't take long, and obviously that isn't the case. Fire Emblem is not necessarily a small game now in terms of production, so yeah, I was a decent amount off there. Then I thought we would get Gen 1 remakes in November 2021. And the reason I thought this was because I thought it would be perfect for the 25th anniversary for them to remake Gen 1. I mean, that makes sense, right? And they did remake Gen 1 in November 2018, 3 years before my prediction here. So I was quite a bit out here. But I mean, I was kind of right about them doing stuff for the anniversary, just, you know, quite a bit out in terms of what it was they were doing. I mean, obviously not with the Legends Arceus and the action-adventure Pokemon game, but and to be fair, actually, the fact that they released 2 Pokemon games quite close to each other, I got that one down, but then I did think that the action-adventure game was a spin-off, so I'm not sure how much credit I can take for that. And finally, for 2021, I thought we were going to get Mii Fit, which, just like with Mii Sports, was just going to be Wii Fit, but without the Wii branding. And we didn't get this, but we also kinda did get this, because we got Ring Fit Adventure, admittedly 2 years before, in October 2019, but it kind of fills the same niche, and I mean, it did sell really well. Ring Fit Adventure was a bit of a force to be reckoned with. So yeah, I would say that, you know, in terms of that, I predicted that we would get something fitness based. So that's about all I can really claim there. But it's something, honestly. I'll take all the wins I can get, considering how poorly this has gone overall. So the final year of this was 2022. Now, I started off the year, or my predictions of the year, with Pokemon Snap 2 in January of 2022. Now, I'm going to be honest, in 2018, I think, I'm going to be honest, predicting a Pokemon Snap game coming to the Switch at all, I think, was itself a fairly... it was a fairly out there claim, because, you know, we hadn't heard from the series in a long, basically since it released. So I'm gonna, the fact that I did not only manage to guess that we would get a Pokemon Snap, but I also got it within a year. We got it April 2021. The fact that I guessed that and got it within a year, I would say is pretty impressive, considering it's Pokemon Snap. Next was Mario and Sonic at the 2022 Beijing Olympics, Winter Olympics, that is. Again, I predicted February 2022. We did not get a Mario and Sonic at the Winter Olympics. We don't seem to get a lot of Winter Olympic games recently. So I'm guessing that, again, they don't have the rights to make those games. Next was a Mario Sunshine remake in March 2022. I thought this was going to be like a full remake, you know, or you know, improved graphics and controls and stuff. And for some reason, I also thought it would take out the voice acting. I don't know. That was just a thing that I thought would happen. Obviously, we did get a Mario Sunshine release on the Switch through 3D All Stars. That was September 2020, but that isn't really the same thing as I was talking about here. So really, I wasn't very close at all. Next was Mario and Luigi, another Mario and Luigi RPG. April 2022, I guessed, and again, we haven't got a Mario and Luigi game. So this starts a solid chunk of this list now, where I have just guessed things that have not happened. Starting with May 2022, Duck Hunt 2. This was very much the point where I was like, okay, we're gonna get some stuff that we can't predict. And I mean, sure, we have had things that we can't predict, which I'll get onto in a minute, but Duck Hunt has not been one of them. I mean, I guess the fact that I didn't predict them right, it kind of proves the point, but yeah, Duck Hunt isn't a franchise that's likely to come back soon. At some point that they might make some sort of sequel, but yeah, the Switch was not it. Then in June 2022, I thought we were going to get Metroid Prime 5. Again, I don't think I really understood, you know, how development of games works. I mean, I thought, okay, well, if we get Prime 4 in whenever I said we'd get it, then surely Prime 5 would only take a few years to develop because it's a sequel. But I mean, we haven't even got Prime 4 yet, so this was nowhere near. July 2022, I predicted a Mario vs Donkey Kong game. Now, I'm very surprised that we haven't gotten a Mario vs Donkey Kong game. To be fair, we haven't had as many of these smaller titles that you would see on something like the DS or the 3DS. I mean, we've had things like Box Boy, Snipper Clips, Sushi Strikers, but it's been few and far between, realistically, so this hasn't happened either. And then we come to Miitopia 2, which was my September 2022 prediction. Now, we haven't gotten a sequel to Miitopia, but I kind of, in my post, I did clarify that it would just be something like in the same sort of realm. So, not necessarily Mii series as in Wii Sports or Wii Fit, that kind of thing, but it would be more like Tomodachi Life or Miitopia. So, in that regards, I mean, I did predict that we'd get something Miitopia related, and we did, but it was May 2021 that we got it. So I was, again, over a year out there. Then my next prediction was that we would get a big Zelda game, using the same engine as Breath of the Wild, and I thought that would come November 2022. So this would very much be like a sequel to Breath of the Wild, and lo and behold, we are getting a sequel to Breath of the Wild, which seems to use the same engine and largely the same world, although with some changes. And yeah, so I said November 2022. May 2023 is when it's actually releasing. I would say, considering a lot of people thought it would come earlier, because it's been a long time since it's been in development, and a lot of people thought that it would come earlier. I'm fairly happy with that as a prediction, although my prediction that it would release on this console as well as the next console, that obviously hasn't happened, which, yeah, I would say I can't really be too upset about not getting that correct, because again, the Switch has had a lifespan that I don't think most people would have predicted. I mean, they did give us some indications early on, but it was difficult to necessarily see it. So, yeah, I at least got the idea of getting a big Zelda game right. And then, finally, my final prediction, December 2022, a Pokemon Gen 8 sequel. I thought that they would go the route of, okay, you have the Gen 8 game, give it your DLC, do a remake, and then do a sequel. And yeah, that didn't happen, obviously. We instead have, in December 2022, we instead jumped straight to Generation 9, which I didn't anticipate, obviously. But yeah, so that one hasn't happened. The last thing I want to talk about is the things that I missed out, realistically. So I made a lot of guesses about things that we would get, and a lot of them ended up not happening. But we did get other things that I didn't even think about. So I wanted to just kind of have a look at some of those. Just have a look at the kinds of things that we got that I hadn't even considered. So we got, for example, Kirby and the Forgotten Land. As I mentioned, I did predict that we'd get a second Kirby game. I just didn't predict it would be a 3D Kirby game. Ring Fit Adventure, again, I predicted a Mii Fit game, but Ring Fit Adventure is not Mii Fit, and I didn't think we'd get anything like that. So that was a nice surprise. I really do like Ring Fit, so it's a great game, but I would never have thought we'd get something like that. Xenoblade 3, again, I predicted Xenoblade X2, but the idea of getting a Xenoblade 3 just didn't occur to me, and I'm not sure why. Three Hopes, Fire Emblem Three Hopes, I just completely overlooked these warrior-style games. I'm not entirely sure why. But yeah, I completely overlooked the idea of us getting a warrior style game for Fire Emblem, and actually Zelda as well. I didn't think about Age of Calamity. Well, I mean, obviously, but I didn't think that of us getting another Hyrule Warriors game. I didn't consider the idea of us getting Gen 9. I just thought they'd do one generation this console. I guess, I mean, that may have been wishful thinking, honestly. I've always liked the idea of them, instead of giving us a generation every, 2 generations per console, them trying to stretch out a generation and just giving us more diverse content. And as you saw, I threw in, obviously there would be DLC onto the Gen 8 game. I threw in a Gen 1 sequel, a Gen 4 sequel, which we did get both of those, although one was in Gen 7, so... but I also threw in an action-adventure, I called it spin-off, but an action-adventure Pokemon game, and then a sequel after that. So I think that if they wanted to, they could stretch generations out and still have some great content, but they're not going to do that. I didn't predict Nintendo Labo. I don't think anyone's going to blame me for not predicting that they would sell us cardboard, but here we are. I didn't predict Astral Chain. Astral Chain is one of those games that didn't exist. I don't believe it had been announced. It might have been announced by that point, but I guess I was viewing it as a third party, which is also why I didn't predict Bayonetta, because Bayonetta is third party, so I wasn't counting it for this specific prediction list, but it does fill the slot of a first party game, essentially. It's Bayonetta is practically first party at this point, in all but an official capacity, I think. I didn't predict 3D All-Stars, but I did predict elements of it, such as the idea of us getting some sort of remake of Sunshine. Obviously, it wasn't a remake, but we did get a Sunshine release, even if it was in 3D All-Stars. I didn't predict the Switch Online service specifically. Again, that was a difficult one for anyone to predict, so I'm not too unhappy about not predicting that. I didn't predict we'd get a Clubhouse Games game. I didn't predict we'd get a sequel to Clubhouse Games. I don't think I'd heard of Clubhouse Games before, the Switch version came out. So yeah, I was never going to predict that. And I did predict some smaller things, I think. But yeah, Clubhouse Games was never going to be one of them. Metroid Dread completely slipped my radar. I didn't even consider the idea of us getting a 2D Metroid. Not sure why, but Mario Kart Live, I mean, Mario Kart Live, again, was a difficult one for anyone to predict. This is one of the nice things about the Switch. There's been so many things we can't predict because they're just really weird and wacky and out there. And that's not a bad thing, I don't think. There was also Mario Golf, which I didn't predict, and Mario Strikers as well, because I thought that I genuinely thought that we were going to get different sports. We also didn't get Big Brain. Oh, I didn't guess Big Brain Academy. I never would have predicted that, because I never would have thought that they would have brought it back. I have a lot of nostalgia for the Wii version, but I didn't think that they'd bring it back. So yeah, I didn't predict any of the smaller games, things like Good Job, the Stretchers, and the Japanese exclusive Buddy Mission Bond. I didn't predict any of those. Again, that's what it is. Why would I have predicted those? They're so out there. I think it is worth noting that I didn't. It is worth noting that I didn't actually consider the possibility of a new IP being added, and we did get plenty. I mean, games like Game Builder Garage, Nintendo Labo could be considered new IP. Astral Chain. And as I said, the Good Job, the Stretchers, Buddy Mission Bond, they're all new IPs. Smaller new IPs, most of them, but they're still there. And I just didn't think of them. So, or I didn't think of the idea of us getting another one. Maybe because of the fact I was so focused on the idea that we had already got one in ARMS and Splatoon before that. So, but you know, we haven't had a proper major new IP really. So there is that. And finally, I didn't predict any ports. I mentioned this earlier, but yeah, I thought the ports were just going to die out towards the end of the Switch's life. I thought we weren't going to get any later on. So yeah, that was all of the things that I didn't predict. Which, I mean, most of these were like anyone would have been hard pushed to predict, but there were some like. For example, Metroid Dread, it was one that I probably should have thought of, and Warriors games as well, and Xenoblade 3. There are some there that I probably should have thought of, I just didn't. And that's basically it. This video, frankly, doesn't necessarily have a point. It's more, I made this list a long time ago, and I thought it would have been a cute idea when I made it every year to go back and make a post on, you know, on Reddit, just kind of calling back to that prediction I made, and thinking, what did I get right, what did I get wrong, you know, just a bit of a laugh. I did it one year, but no one responded, because why would they? Probably no one remembered the post. So now that I have my own, you know, little corner of the internet where, you know, I can say what I want to say to 20 people, I thought it would just be interesting to look back at what my mindset was way back when the Switch when the Switch was new, when it just released, and just see, I mean, how incredibly wrong I got it, but also how incredibly wrong realistically we all got it. Because, as I said, there were some things here we would never have predicted. I mean, the idea that Pikmin 4 was going to take until 2023 to come out. You know, the fact that we would get something like Nintendo Labo. The fact that we wouldn't get any Mario and Sonic at the Winter Olympics games. Who would have predicted that? You know, Metroid Prime taking as long as it's taken. So many different things. Us not getting some of the announced games like Detective Pikachu that we have had announced, which just hasn't happened. The idea of not getting a Mario Kart. Smash. Getting Smash as early as we got it. You know, there were so many things that we couldn't predict back then. And I think it's always really interesting because even when we can't predict things, we still try. You know, I mean, I am guilty of it as well. I mean, half of my channel has been dedicated to a sort of prediction / wish list on Mario Kart, which became immediately invalid as soon, like 2 days after I posted the final part. And then I have my Smash roster video, which, I mean, thank you to everyone who's watched that, because that is still getting consistent views, which is I wasn't expecting, considering it's almost 2 hours. But you know, I immediately after the last Smash game finished, like, my idea was I need to predict the next Smash game. I don't know what the future's going to look like, but I made that prediction anyway. And in fact, that prediction that I have made has already changed. I've already made some significant changes to it. So yeah, I would say that, yeah, I would say it's interesting that we try to predict things in situations where we can't predict things because we don't have any basis to be working on. But we do it anyway. And it's fun. I enjoyed making this list, and I've enjoyed going back through it and, you know, seeing how far out I got things. These are the kinds of things that are fun, and it's the fun part of being a fan of a company like Nintendo, or not even just a company like Nintendo, but a fan of video games in general. Because no matter how much we try to predict things, it'll never work out that way, and that's the fun part. That's what I enjoy about the speculation side of being a Nintendo fan. and a gaming fan in general. And that's why things like the Smash speculation and just being a Nintendo fan in general have never bothered me, because I find the fun side in the predictions and speculations. I find the fun side instead of the toxic, the toxic entitlement side of it. So I guess that was my reason for wanting to do this, and I hope it was at least interesting, maybe a bit enjoyable, and I will hopefully have another video out soon. I have had a video that I've wanted to release for a while, but unfortunately it won't render, so that video might be out in maybe later this year. But another video that I'm working on should be fairly easy for me to get done relatively soon, maybe a few months. So look out for those ones, and I'll see you whenever I see you.